Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Backer and welcome to Write Better Stories. Today we're going to talk about a novel by the name of Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. And so if you've seen any other videos on this channel, you'll know that recently I've been growing a little tired of some of these bigger, longer literary novels that are very sprawling. And so Agatha Christie ended up being a very good choice to read something that felt very smart, but also very contained and driven by a plot. Obviously, anything with a mystery associated with it is going to demand some sort of big payoff at the end, as well as very economical development throughout. And so I think that's one of the strongest points of this novel, is that on almost every single page, there's some sort of new advancement or development that pushes the story forward. So one of my favorite examples of development within this novel has to do with Lynette Ridgway and Simon. So Simon is actually engaged to Jackie, who is Lynette's best friend. And when she first meets Simon, Lynette that is, she mentions that she really likes her best friend's fiance. But then the next time that they're all mentioned, Lynette is engaged to Simon. And so there's really no time to ruminate on this within the text. There's no long prosaic descriptions describing the slow burn of their eventual entanglement like something in Anna Karenina. This just cuts right to the chase. It's mentioned that Lynette is interested in Simon, and then the next thing we know, Simon has left Jackie and is engaged to Lynette. So this introduces the next thing that I want to talk about, is that we end up having a victim in this story, Lynette Ridgway, who's kind of hateable. She is a likable character in terms of entertainment, that she's well fleshed out and she is interesting within the story, but she's very spoiled and kind of unaware. A lot of her actions rub people the wrong way within the novel, and that gives the other characters around her a ton of motivation to kill her. One of these distasteful things that Lynette Ridgway does is toward the beginning, she's talking about displacing people in cottages in order to build her new swimming pool at her house. And she's very rich and very spoiled. And so even though she's technically like a nice person, she's kind of blissfully unaware and was sort of coddled within her privilege. And so she does a lot of things that end up making other people mad, even though she doesn't really know it. As you might have guessed, the fact that she ended up getting with her best friend's fiance and making him her fiance definitely makes Jackie one of the prime suspects. However, we end up introducing a lot of misdirection within the story too, because the first attempt on Lynette's life, where a boulder almost falls on her when they're in Egypt, it could not possibly have been pushed by Jackie. Now that doesn't mean that Jackie didn't help plan this or anything like that, but at that point in the story, it makes it a little bit more confusing because we are led to believe that Jackie would be the prime suspect. Tim Allerton, who's a very brooding young man, becomes another suspect within this case as well. And one of the things that draws our attention to this is he's very uneasy about the fact that Poirot, our detective, is on this vacation with everybody. And so this makes it seem like some sort of plan of Tim's is going to be foiled, or that by having the genius Poirot intellect around, Tim Allerton won't be able to get up to his nefarious ways. Now, does that include murder? I don't really want to give that away in this video, but it does make it a lot more interesting having all of these characters with different motives so that we have to try to guess and piece it together. Now, I'll tell you, when I was reading this, I never would have been able to piece this together. I guess little breadcrumbs were laid all along the way, but there are so many characters that have motive to kill Lynette Ridgway, and then also it's such a complicated sequence of events and plans that actually end up killing her that it's very impressive as a reader to read it, but I never would have gotten it by reading it. Now, maybe if I read more of hers, I'll get more attuned to that style, but as I was reading it, I was entertained to just be totally surprised by the end. So within this novel too, there's also plenty of examples of suspense, and I've discussed this many times on the channel, but I'll review it again now. Suspense doesn't necessarily mean that eerie feeling in a horror movie or in a thriller. It actually means the anticipation of action. It's when something happens that demands future action and it sets up and plays with audience expectations. And so this is perfect in a mystery novel because a lot of the characters end up doing suspicious things early on that make us suspect them as suspects in Lynette Ridgway's murder. But in addition to that, there are plenty of examples in this book of also just story suspense outside of any kind of mystery genre context. So I'm going to mention two examples of suspense that I think drive this story really well. The first one's actually pretty simple. It's just that about 3/4 the way through the book, Poirot says he knows who the killer is, but he doesn't tell us. Now, this isn't any kind of like mind-blowing, complex storytelling technique. It's simply just suspending that information from the audience, saying that it's not going to give it to us right now. And even though that might seem a little dissatisfying, it's very effectively used because it keeps us turning the pages. We want to find out who the murderer is. We know that Poirot has it, but he's not going to tell us just yet. Another great example of suspense in this story is when Lynette opens up a letter that was actually intended for Ricchetti. And so he ends up getting really mad that she read his letter and she just said it was about like potatoes and carrots and things like that. Why did Ricchetti get so mad about this? Things like this end up driving the story forward and just creating that sense of expectation that there will be some sort of reveal both about Ricchetti's letter and about the story at large. And so I don't really want to give away this ending, like I said in this video, because one of the great effects of the mystery is the big tell-all, where the detective puts it all together and tells you how it was right in front of you the whole time. There were people that were kind of on my mind that I thought the story was asking me to suspect, but since I felt like I was being asked to suspect them, I assumed that those could not have been the answer. So I think this book is just full of a lot of very skillful storytelling techniques that can help you write better stories.